news and bad news. You already know the first part of the bad news, which is I'm standing between you and dinner. The good news is I'm not going to try to do slides because we have a little problem with the light there, so you don't have to suffer through. But the bad news is I'm still going to take on my fundamental mission, which is to make sure everybody in this room squirms uncomfortably at least once, and preferably a few more times in the next 10 or 15 minutes, because I'm going to challenge you with this simple notion. This is the title of my comments. We are winning battles and losing the war. And I say that with great certainty as a guy who does this work both at the local level, my own community, I'm a planning board member, and also somebody who's trying to tackle this problem at the national level. So let me explain. And in fact, here's what I'm going to do. Here are the things you're going to hear from me. My basic point is that we got to move, and we don't. Yelling at us does not help, but changing our communities does. The only way we're going to do something about this is start to win the war, not just the battles, and there's people like you speak up, act up, and step up. That's going to be my challenge. Speak up, act up, and step up. That's what we're going to conclude with. But we're going to start with an exercise, if you will. Join me. We did this at lunch, and I think it's worth doing, right? Because I want you to think about your perspective on active lifestyles. Because we're told all the time we should move more. It's good for us. Exercise is good. So let's think about that a little bit. So I want everybody in the room to close their eyes. I mean, really close your eyes. Not theoretically keep peeking at what I'm doing. I'm doing nothing. It's boring. So close your eyes. And think back to your own earliest fond recollections of being physically active as a youngster. There's a grouchy guy with his arms folded in the middle won't close his eyes. Everybody else has their eyes closed. Thank you. You're thinking back to your earliest fond recollection of being physically active as a little kid. I'm not talking high school sports. I want you to play the memory tapes back as far as you can go to being active as a little kid. Okay? Picture who you were with. What was the physical setting? Where were you? What were you doing? What kind of things did you do at that age to be active? Okay, as soon as you have an image in your mind, go ahead and open your eyes, turn to the person next to you, share those recollections for 10 seconds each. Right now. Just share those recollections right now. So how many of you, for the most part, did your recollection of that period entail being only with kids of the same age and gender? Kids of the same age and gender. So you're a 10-year-old boy, you're only with 10-year-old boys. How many remember activities that occurred at a scheduled time and place? That's all you can really recall. Scheduled activities. How many remember activities where there had to be an adult present to do it? A few of you. How many actually had to have a uniform to do the activity? You purchased or were given. How many remember there having to be an umpire or a referee, for example? Hands up for that. Okay, so we've had a hand raise so far. How many remember activities where you were with kids of different ages and different genders? It might have been boys and girls, older and younger, playing together. Whoever you could get for that pickup game of capture the flag in the backyard or stickball out on the road. How many remember not necessarily having an adult present when you were being physically active? How many remember specifically doing things you could not have gotten away with if an adult had, in fact, been present? Tell the truth. And how many of you are now elected officials? Just out of... That's not a good sign at all. How many remember activities that involved a wheeled vehicle, a bicycle, a tricycle, a scooter, a skateboard, a big wheel, roller skates with a key? Anybody remember those? Anybody else remember those kind of skates? How many remember activities that involve water in one form or another? Skating on a frozen pond, swimming in a creek or a pool, or how about just playing in that neighborhood creek out in the backyard? Does anybody remember doing that, or somebody's backyard, or in the woods somewhere? Okay, if you'll allow me to use the term of art, how many of you recall, to some degree or another, having been what I like to call a free-range kid? Free-range kid, able to disappear on a Saturday morning, be told get home at lunch or at dinner, or maybe, in my case, when the street lights come on. In the summer nights, that was our come in. Do you remember that? Who had a fort in the woods somewhere, or a neighborhood lot that was the place kids went to do pickup games? Some place that was the kid place in your neighborhood. Wait, let's see that. How many hands, kid place in your neighborhood? Or somewhere in your community. All right. Last two questions are the most important, so listen very closely. How many of you believe the majority of kids growing up today are free-range kids? The majority of kids today, free-range kids. Hands up for that. Look around the room. Don't look at me. Look at your votes. Last question. How many think it's good for the next generation? We're raising a robust generation of youth that they're not free-range. Good for their health to not be free-range. Hands up for that. Let's think about what we just said, you guys. As recently as a generation or two ago, it is not that long, right? I mean, look at the average age of the women in this room is about 29, right? So it's how long ago are we talking? Right? That recently, we were free-range kids. We all agree there are far fewer of them now, and further, we agree that it's not good for them. To which I ask you one specific and detailed question. What precisely are you? What precisely is the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission going to do about it? And if your answer is nothing, get off the board now. I'm not kidding. If you're not prepared to help build a world that's better for free-range kids, you're not in the right job. You also probably shouldn't be serving in your community, whatever role it is that brought you here. And I am not kidding in the least. So let's talk about the other things on my list here. Because here's what we know. We're raising a generation of kids of which we now expect the Centers for Disease Control, just projecting forward the current data, tells us 1 in 3 in their lifetime will end up with type 2 diabetes. By the way, we call it type 2 diabetes. We don't call it adult onset diabetes, which was the term we used as recently as 10 or 15 years ago. Because in the clinical sense, we thought you couldn't get that disease till you were in your 40s and 50s. Right? But now we see it in 9 and 10-year-old kids. A disease we thought you couldn't get to adulthood, so now we have to use the clinical term. Right? This is mind-boggling. If you're in the medical community, we don't see diseases like this change that dramatically in 10 or 20 years. This is really why. What are the two dominant risk factors for a disease like that? Physical inactivity and poor nutrition. If you ask me about the epidemics we face as a nation, people are saying, we've got an obesity epidemic. What we have is twin epidemics of physical inactivity and poor nutrition. We know, getting to my first point, that we got to move, that everybody should get at least 30 minutes of physical activity a day. We know national guidelines tell us kids should get at least an hour, that it doesn't have to be structured exercise, it doesn't have to be a sports team, that incidental physical activity counts, that walking to the bus in the morning, 10 minutes, if that's how you commute to work, walking for errands for 10 minutes at lunchtime, and then taking the bus home and retracing your 10-minute walk home. If you accumulated that as an adult, you'd meet the minimum recommendations, and you'd be at reduced risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, a growing list of cancers, wait for it, dementia and old age. You would live a longer, healthier, more complete life just by moderate daily physical activity. We know kids need more like an hour a day. But again, it doesn't have to be on a sports team. It could be all of the things that you remember being a free-range kid. Walking to and from school. People here talk about riding your bike to your friend's house, running around the neighborhood. That all counts. Now, the data tells us if you can do more, you get better benefit. But those are minimum goals. But here's the scary number. The Centers for Disease Control will tell us 20% of Americans meet those guidelines, and those of us who read the research closely tell you the number is closer to 5% of Americans meeting those minimum guidelines. When we actually put devices on people's hips and measure their physical activity, we have become so sedentary because of the nature of our jobs, our transportation. We drive everywhere, we sit at computer terminals, we've got a huge amount of screen time in our lives. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, anything you haven't read in the news, but it's really earth-shattering to realize that we're now at a point where maybe 1 in 20 of us meet these very modest recommendations of about a half an hour physical activity a day for adults, an hour a day for kids. We got to move, and we don't. Sure, there's that group. I know there's some of you that ride your bikes and you're like, I ran a road in a century last year, or I'm training for a marathon. Sure, you're the outliers. If we do the bell curve distribution of humans, in American society and physical activity, that person training for the marathon is like 3 standard deviations off of the curve to this side, right? In the middle of the curve, we're pretty sedentary. One more important point on this. The Centers for Disease Control has done this for a long time, actually. 20 years ago, 1996, they actually came out with a report, the Surgeon General's report on physical activity and health, which was very much like the Surgeon General's report on smoking and health. And they came up with very clear recommendations. We all have to move more. We've known it for a long time. We've been trying to encourage people and tell people and run programs and exercise. We've had worksite wellness programs, and we have not moved the needle at all. That 5 to 10% number I talked about, unchanged for 20 years. That's a little distressing for somebody who spent the bulk of his career promoting physical activity. I did a PBS TV series about this. I've written books. I've done all this stuff to no avail. Apparently I'm flapping my lips. Generating wind, no change. What we know, there's lots of research that actually tells us encouraging alone is not enough. That what we have to do is take what the public health people will tell you is called a socio-ecological approach. Social ecology is actually not unfamiliar to you. I would challenge you to think about this for a moment. I would challenge you, you know one of the great successes we've had in public health based on a socio-ecological approach. And the approach says you can't just focus on the individual. You have to have other influences in their life, steer them in the right direction. You have to have, for example, their family and friends, their workplace, their school, their healthcare provider, the physical environment of their community, even public policies, all steer them in a direction. And when you do that, then the behavior can change at the population level. And indeed, one of our great successes in public health in the last 20 years, a very unhealthy habit that we've really changed the norms on, is what? Based on the socio-ecological approach. What have we changed? Say, smoking, cigarette use. Do you not agree that when I was a kid, it would have been perfectly normal to be in an enclosed car with somebody who was smoking. When I was a competitive athlete, I'd sit on an airplane and have to ask for a seat in the non-smoking section. Do you remember what that meant? You could well be 2 rows in front of somebody in the smoking section and smoking secondhand smoke the whole way. Correct? Right? But what have we done? We've changed it. And not just by asking people, hey, don't smoke. Right? We've made it difficult to smoke in public places. We've taxed the product mercilessly. We've stopped advertising it on television. We've enforced the ban on the sales to minors. We've changed the social ecology of smoking in our society. Agreed? The social norms have changed. Used to be it would be weird for you at a table to ask the next table not to smoke. Now you look over and say, hey, not smoking in the restaurant, remember? Right? Normal. My kids will never experience cigarette smoke on an airplane, not because when we get on the plane we say, hey guys, there are going to be kids on this flight, would you mind not smoking? It's because the law says you can, and if you screw around with the smoke detector, they'll land it and state troopers will drag you off. It's the law. Now why am I making this point? Because we've got to ask the question, what do we do about physical activity and nutrition to be equally successful? We have to take a socio-ecological approach. And what we know now, you ready for this? Although telling people exercise doesn't work, building communities where it happens naturally does. We've got plenty of data from communities around the United States whereby the physical structure of the community, we see people be more physically active, and in particular, walking, bicycling, and taking transit more often. So it's routine physical activity. They don't have to have a health club membership. They don't change their clothes. It happens as a part of daily life. And those differences are well distinguishable by the research. So you should be saying to me, okay, smarty pants, fast talking guy, what is it that makes such places? 4 things. The research tells us 4 things characterize environments where people are more active as a part of their daily life. Number 1, there's a greater mix of land uses in close proximity. So for the planning wonks among us, that's a familiar term. If you go to planning conferences, we talk about this stuff all the time. There are entire tracks in the conferences now about planning for healthy communities. One of the big things we talk about is mixed use, right? Where we live and work and shop and play, where we learn, where we pray. Those things should be more mixed together, not segregated. We talk about the fact that modern suburban design with single-use Euclidean zoning, housing subdivision, mall, housing subdivision, office park, and where are the schools? Cheapest land out on the edge that we could get, right? Because we got it in a land swap with the developer or paid the lease for it because we wanted to keep our taxes down. Never once analyzing the long-term cost of transporting kids to that school, right, over its lifespan. We took a very short-sighted view when we did that analysis. That's modern zoning, right? And it's entirely contrary to routine physical activity. But that's not enough. Number 2, so I've got to have that mix of land uses. Number 2, I have to have a good network of facilities connecting those. Things like sidewalks, bicycle lanes and sharrows, multi-use trails, transit. There's good evidence that regular transit riders are statistically more likely to get their 30 minutes of physical activity a day by virtue of the act of walking to and from the bus at either end of their trip. By the way, I have plenty of photos from Springfield illustrating these very attributes. We have shots from all over town showing mixed-use neighborhoods which were well-served by sidewalks and transit stops and so on. The third element, good site design. what I call functional site design. So when I get to my destination, it rewards me rather than punishes me for showing up without a car. Think about what that means. Think about that. Think about modern suburban style design. What's the dominant architectural feature? Giant parking lot, building set back, right? Getting from the sidewalk to the front door might well be a little game of Frogger, where you dance your way across the parking lot, hoping not to get hit by those people that circle around looking for the really close spot. You know those people. You know who you are. You know. But it's also things like benches and awnings and street trees and high-quality bicycle parking near the front of the door. In other words, the details of site design encourage rather than discourage the walking, the bicycling, the transit train. It's a transit stop that's more than just a post in the ground with a sign on it. There might actually be a concrete pad and a shelter and a bench and a trash can that gets emptied and a current schedule. Right? That's how we... And let's go a step further to the 21st century. There'd be some arrival information, or there'd be an app for your phone that tells you when the bus is going to get there and how long your route's going to be. Right? It's just 21st century. I mean, that's just what the cities that are doing well are doing. 4. School can be close enough. There can be a sidewalk to get me there. The site design can be good. Nice bike rack for my son to park his bike close to the door. If I feel he's going to get run over on the way there, I'm still not going to let him go. So we need to have safety. We have to design in a way that is safe and fully accessible, and I mean accessible in the sense of the Americans with Disabilities Act, for everybody in my community, all ages, all income levels, all physical abilities and disabilities. Those 4 things. You could argue with me about that if you want, about sort of how you read the research, but I guarantee you, if you look at this research literature, you would see again and again that those 4 things characterize the communities that have the highest shares of walking, bicycling, and transit use. Across the country, across geographic areas, across income levels. Pretty compelling. We've got a picture. We know how to build it. Which leads me to my call to action for you. Because I'm going to suggest we need to speak up. And you would say, hey, I've worked on sort of my local trailer. Yeah, I supported sidewalks. What we've been doing so far is winning battles. Nice sidewalk here, got a bike lane stretch over there, and losing the war. Creating giant swaths of retail-style development, big boxes at the back of parking lots entirely oriented for cars. So we have our one little success, and that's our victory. We win the battle. Meanwhile, we build these housing subdivisions on the end, and we make that bad decision about that new school complex. Right, the consolidated school that every kid will be driven to, we lost the war. Because that's a 50-year decision when you make it to a school like that, right? I say this in the context of you have some big 50-year decisions coming up, and it's interesting because your new public works director alluded, said all the right words, but it'll be, you guys have a test before you, which is where you're going to come down on some of those decisions. So let's talk about it. Speak up, act up, step up. Speak up is, you have to sing this song. You really have to be telling the story. You have to say, we need to build a world for free-range kids. We know how to do it. These 4 attributes, that can become your mental checklist. And we can't just do it in spot fixes here and there. Systematically, with every decision we make, whether it's in your community or as a regional planning authority, our decisions should all be trying to advance those 4 elements. Speak up. Act up. I think there's some 5 specific strategic areas that are showing great promise. Indeed, I was invited by the journal Childhood Obesity. There's actually a journal about it. That's how bad this is now. Devoted to it. And they asked me to do a review article. It said, Mark, talk to us. You've been in the game now for 30 years. Talk to us about what you think are the most promising strategies for fighting childhood obesity. And they expected they were going to get an article that talks about things like physical education programs and recess and exercise programs at YMCAs and in parks and rec departments. You know what my 5 things were? Healthy zoning ordinances and planning principles, complete streets, transportation trail networks, transportation demand management programs, and safe routes to school. I thought they were never going to even accept this article. This is like so wonky and nerdy and has nothing to do with what they're looking for. Guess what? They not only accepted it, we ran it, it became a big review article, and it generated a lot of buzz in the public health community because people started talking about the fact that maybe we in public health better be talking to people like you who do regional transportation planning and infrastructure if we're really serious about this stuff. So those are 5 things I would implore you all to be thinking about impending decisions coming before you. That first one, it's really about mixed land use, right? It's about making sure our ordinances and all of our land use decisions reflect this. One really good example of a way a community is doing this is in Nashville, Tennessee, for example, the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization there, has actually changed how they score potential projects for their transportation improvement plan. So when they're creating the priority list for their TIP, they now do a full multimodal analysis. And they score based not just on what you're going to do for motor vehicle level of service, they ask about pedestrian, bicycle, and transit outcomes as well. And your score, your final score, will depend on your ability in all four of those categoric areas. If you don't do well enough in the other three, what I call the active modes, walk, bike, transit, you'll never get a high enough score to ever move up high enough on the tip to get funded. So guess what they've seen happen to the projects that come into the MPO for consideration? They've all got all four modes accommodated. Is that even remotely surprising? You want to get money, you better put it on your plan. So now they're accommodating bicycles, pedestrians, and transit in every plan they generate, all their projects. That is really nothing more than a procedural change, if you ask me. It's how you build your score sheet. You guys can do it. You have people who want to here. I know because I've talked to some of them in the room here. So I urge you to go down that path. 2, complete streets. Everybody here familiar with the term? Raise your hand if you're familiar with the phrase complete streets. Okay, so let's make sure. It's a pretty simple premise. It's a national campaign, and at its heart it says this: a street is not complete unless you take into account all four modes: the pedestrian, the bicycle, the transit, and the motor vehicle. It doesn't say you stripe a bike lane on every street. It says you always ask the question, what's appropriate? What are the adjoining land uses? What are the potential bicycle and pedestrian trips? And then you build accordingly. You don't just put a road on the ground, and if there happens to be a little room left over, stick a sidewalk on the side. Or if we happen to have a wide shoulder, okay, we'll stripe it, throw down bike decals, and call it a bike lane. You actually decide that this corridor needs that infrastructure we're going to design for those people, those users, right? So, complete streets. Turns out we reviewed and had a great session today talking about the draft bicycle and pedestrian plan, which is for Springfield essentially a complete streets implementation plan. I was blown away on how far along this thing is. They're calling it a draft. It is really in good shape. I made some recommendations. I think there's some stuff you can do to even power it up more. But here's the point, the most important point about that complete streets plan. If all it ends up being is a great plan, it's not enough. You guys have to decide you're going to actually see it implemented. You're going to have to be the ones that step up every time we're touching a road, asking the question. And by the way, when I mean every time, I'm talking routine paving. I'm talking the road got torn up for sewer work. When we put it back down, there's an opportunity to stripe the bike lanes at practically no marginal cost, right? We're repaving anyway, but let's ask the question, could we make it more complete? This is important because one of the problems we get from complete streets all the time, the argument, it's going to cost so much more. Not if you do it opportunistically. Not if you build it into requirements, subdivision regulations, so that when the private sector is building something, they have to meet those standards. Complete streets. 3, transportation trail networks. Many of us are. I think this is a classic example of battles won or lost. So we've built lots of trails around the United States over the last couple of decades. Rails to Trails Conservancy will tell you we're on our way to the 20,000th mile trail. And they're great. I love them. I'm a multi-use trail fan. Here's the problem. Many of those miles are miles you drive a car to a trailhead somewhere, take your bike off and go ride. They're great. I love them. I'm not saying we don't need them. But I'm telling you, there is data to tell us the most used sections of trails, when they've done studies of long corridors, for example, that have varying character over the corridor, the most used sections have 3 characteristics. 1, they're well connected to the other elements of the transportation network. Not just to trailheads, but to things like sidewalks, bicycle lanes, transit stops. You don't have to drive your car to get on the trail. That's takeaway number 1. Number 2, the trail gets you to actual destinations. Things like schools, playgrounds, parks, shopping areas, senior housing. Not shocking, right? 3, the trail is woven into the fabric of the community rather than an escape from the community. Those things you see again and again in the research studies that have done trail counts and compared areas with high traffic versus low. Areas where the trail is well guarded versus largely ignored by the community. Connected to the other elements of the transportation network. Connected to destinations. Woven into the fabric of the community. Now, a quick warning on this. I know how hard this is because we've done trail work I live in Situate, Massachusetts. And we've done some trail work there. It's a challenge. We've had some wins, some losses. And I knew when we were doing our public meetings that the NIMBYs, the bananas, and the caves were going to show up. You know what the NIMBYs are, right? Not in my backyard. You know what the bananas are? They say build absolutely nothing, anywhere near anything. We're a rural town. We don't want that stuff. That's urban character. Take it away. Stop it. And then who are the cavemen? That's the citizen against virtually everything, right? They just show up to yell at me. They just bang the table, right? Get on the local access television station. My point is, we know I can write the script for the reasons that trail's a bad idea. Weird men with big, thick mustaches will be walking down it. They'll be looking in our windows, throwing trash in our yards, and stealing our children and our flat-screen TVs. Down the trail they go. Right? So we know that's coming. So our job is to anticipate that, make an evidence-based argument that tells us, well, indeed, what we know is well-patrolled trail corridors are actually much safer than the unpatrolled, abandoned rail corridor that's back there now that's got all the broken bottles and where the kids go and hang out and have bonfires and all. Now, you put a trail back there, that stuff doesn't happen. Furthermore, housing values go up proximate to the trail, right? Houses stay on the market for less time. Go down that path and calmly rebut all the emotional responses. That's the case for all of this. That can be the same said for trying to stripe a bike lane in a business district where the business owners say, it's going to be a disaster for our businesses. Those bike lanes, they'll get in the way. I can't figure out where my delivery truck's going to go. I can give the script for all the reasons we can't do it. So what we do is we pull out the data from New York City where they've done scores of these complete streets projects and where they show retail revenue has gone up and statistically significantly more so than in matched streets that didn't get the treatments. Because now a pedestrian, God forbid, can go to a store on one side of the street and then safely cross the street to go to the restaurant on the other side without taking their lives into their hands. So they actually work better for the customer on the street. Because you're a customer after you get out of your car. That's when you actually buy something, right? And as a pedestrian, that's a better street with you. So my point is, our job is to make the evidence base. The last two, transportation demand management and safe routes to school. They're both forms of transportation demand management. They're essentially programs where we use policies and infrastructure and programmatic efforts to shift behavior. So a work site TDM program, Transportation Demand Management Program, might entail, for example, the employer encouraging employees to walk the bike to work, to take transit, but also actually giving them subsidized transit passes and building a locker and a shower room so they can change if they get sweaty riding their bike, and creating nice indoor covered secure bicycle parking and maybe even a bike workstation. Or maybe if they're two small businesses collaborating with 5 or 6 others and doing that together. Or maybe a city like Springfield eventually deciding that in its courts wants to build a bike center that accommodates that, like many other cities have done across the region and across the country. Right? It might be the employer who goes a step further and says, not only am I going to reward you for riding a bike or walking by giving you a discount on your healthcare premium on the portion that you pay, maybe let you earn vacation days. I know employers who have actually done this. Let employees earn vacation days for active commuting. And, wait for it, I'm going to make you pay for your parking space. Why not actually put the market value of the parking space on it, capture that? Oh, God forbid. Carla says, no, we can't do that. Make them pay for parking. We give them free parking. That's what's good for America. That helps businesses, right? You guys know, right? I hope you know of it. If you don't, go get the book, Donald Shoup's book, The High Price of Free Parking. And there's plenty of research that tells us the best way to get parking to be at the proper levels is to actually let the market dictate the price. Actually capture that, and then, you get the behavior. People who want to drive can drive, but they should have to pay for the place. They're renting space every day, a lot of it, and they're putting oil on it while they're at it. They can pay for that. Safe Routes to School is not unlike the TDM programs in a workplace might do, but it targets kids. It's setting up walking routes to the school. It's improving the crosswalks and the signage and making safe, connecting the missing sections of sidewalks and trails. The most important thing about Safe Routes to School is that it should be policy-based. No more of this just doing an encouragement program. That's the stuff that isn't very sticky. I love a walking school bus. My wife and I ran a walking school bus in our neighborhood. You've ever heard of a walking school bus? It's the idea of a designated route to school that some adults walk, picking kids up a long way like the bus, but you're on foot. The idea is it puts at ease the parent who's nervous about the weird mustache men out there, right? I can't let my kid be free range. The mustache men are out there. So instead we walk with those kids to school. We take turns, so there's always one adult. Well, here's the thing about that. After about 2 or 3 years, we noticed the schedule in our neighborhood fell apart. We had, we were Monday, somebody else was Tuesday. Then the parents stopped walking with the kids because what they realized was it really isn't that dangerous. The kids could look out for one another. The older ones watched the younger ones. They knew the route. They knew where to cross. We had a crossing guard. We had some crosswalks repainted. We changed the infrastructure, but we also changed the social norms in our neighborhood. We did one more thing, too. We found a church, St. Mary's, that was just about a quarter mile from the school, because we had this horrible traffic jam for the parents who still were driving to the school. And we offered parents the opportunity to drop off kids at that church parking lot, and we walked by, we picked the kids up along the way. So the idea was ease the traffic jam, and now the kids who are even coming by car get a little walk to school, which is good for them because there is data that tells us academic performance is better, and they act out less in the classroom if they've been physically active before they show up. They're better able to concentrate if they burned a little energy. You can imagine, Mark Fenton was a guy who would have been designated ADHD when he was a kid if he wasn't on sports teams and walking to school every single day. I guarantee you, I would have fallen in that category, but I was burning that energy off. I walked and biked to school every single day from about 3rd grade on. So, we get this remote drop-off area set up, and some parents would go there, but not all of them. Then we put a policy in place, and the policy was this. Cars picking up at the school grounds. We had this horrible conflict. The cars were pulling out at the same time all the pedestrians were leaving. We were afraid somebody was going to get run over. So we put in place this policy which said the cars have to sit for 5 minutes while all the pedestrians and bicyclists leave the school grounds. And then once they're all gone, the cars start to move. That meant the kids who were getting picked up at the school actually had to sit in the gym for a few minutes until they were released to the cars. Guess what we started hearing the kids tell their parents? Under no circumstances, pick me up at the school, please. Let me walk home with my buddies, or at least pick me up down at the church, because I cannot sit in school for 5 more minutes. It might as well be an hour at the end of the day. Let me out. Let me free. Let me free. Now, seriously, the kids started to tell their parents it was the most effective thing we did, this policy approach. And here's my point. If you're serious about safety in school, change the rules. If you're serious about people bicycling and walking and taking transit to work, change the rules. Make them pay for parking, give them a free bus pass, give them somewhere to park their bike. Okay, you get my point. I'm talking systems level change. I'm talking, when you think about trails, you're thinking about a transportation network, not a one-off trail here. You're thinking about what does the trail connect to. When you're thinking about complete streets, you're thinking about it on every single project, including routine paving programs, routine maintenance, opportunistic improvement. And certainly, when you're thinking about land use decisions, you're trying to make things more compact. You're trying to keep where we live and work and shop and play closer together, not more spread apart. This has to be fundamental to the work you do at this planning commission. Otherwise, you are not helping these kids. The last thing I said was act up, or step up. Speak up, act up, step up. Step up is as simple as this. I would challenge everybody in this room to look at their week, their average week, and try to forego one single occupancy vehicle trip a week. Just one. And turn it into one of the active modes if you possibly can. Now you're going to say to me, Mark, I live out in Longmeadow. My job is over in West Springfield. And when I need my car during the day because I got to go see clients, and I say, this is what you're doing. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go walk. So what I want you to do is find another trip. Maybe your commute trip isn't the one you change. Do you ever, at work during the day, hop in your car to go a quarter of a mile to Bank of America to make a deposit or get money and say, you know what, I could have left the car and walked to Bank or whatever, right? Do you do an errand? Do you walk to a friend's house in the evening? Do you drive your kids to an activity that if you really thought about it, you could have hopped on your bikes and ridden them too? The weather's getting gorgeous. Ride your bikes to Little League for your child or something. So I'm really challenging everybody in this room, right now, top of your head, just for the sake of argument, how many could think of a trip that you typically take in the car that once a week, I'm not even saying do it every day, but once a week you can say, you know, I could probably turn that into an active transportation trip. How many of you can think of one right now? Look around the room. I want you to look around. Don't look at me, look around the room, because I want you to see half of the hands are up and half of you are liars. Because you could, and you're just being whiny babies and saying it's too hard. And here's the problem. If it's really that kind, if it's really that hard, then you should be working on something to fix it in your life so that you can do that. Does it mean there's no transit stop anywhere near you? Does it mean that there are missing sidewalk sections in your neighborhood so you wouldn't dare go down that road? Then maybe you should be working as an advocate to get those sidewalks built. Do you get what I'm saying? So any hand who wasn't up, any hand that was up, I expect you to try to do it next week. Any hand that wasn't up, I expect you to start working on whatever the reason is that you can't do it. You with me? I'm serious. Because let me tell you this, and I know this for a fact because I do this all over the country. You walk somewhere and you really understand why others aren't walking there. You try to ride your bike on the street and no more saying, why don't they ride their bikes? You know it. You tried it. Use the transit system. You'll understand why only the people use it as a means of last resort because they don't have a car. Because it's hard to know if you've got the right fare and I don't know what the schedule is. When's the bus going to get here? Is it on schedule today? Right? Those things will all frustrate those of you that have plenty of cars and don't have to do it. So try it once in a while. Then you'll understand what we have to do to make our transit system better. You guys with me on this? Take a breath. home stretch, last story. This is why this matters to me so much. I'll tell you a little story of an experience I had with my wife. A few years ago, because I admit I'm a raving froth at the mouth lunatic, like I'm over the top on this stuff. I get that. And I think it's justified. I hope you will be too, because our kids deserve no less. But here's what brought it home. So I live in Situate, I told you, Situate, Massachusetts. A few years ago, we were going through I was going through a major transition, a little bit of a midlife crisis. I was leaving one job, I was doing this PBS television series, and I'd never done TV before, and that was weird. And I had a book coming out, and I didn't know if that was going to go. And so I was really stressed, and my wife was very nervous I was going to do like a midlife crisis thing and come home with a Corvette or a motorcycle or something. And so she said, you know what we got to do? We got to go out to dinner to our favorite place in town here. Let's go out to dinner and have a talk. And we were going to have the "We love the husband and father you have become" talk. To tell me I was okay, everything's fine. As it happens, we're coming home from dinner that night. We're going over a little bridge, and I'm in a neighborhood that's separated. There's a creek. It's actually a tidal estuary that flows under this bridge. And it turns out that it's a local rite of passage to jump from the bridge into the water. But because of the tide, you have to sort of be a local and know when it's deep enough, because the water really rushes. Sometimes it's too shallow and you can get hurt, sometimes it's deep enough. We're coming home, and we see two little girls standing on the bridge, sort of facing out, and their arms are over the railing, but they're standing on the outer edge of the railing, but they're like this, and they look kind of nervous. And there's apparently a boy down in the water, because we can hear him yelling up, "Hurry up, jump, it's cold! Hurry up, get in, let's go!" And they're going, "Are you sure it's deep enough?" Yes, it's deep enough. "Is the current really bad?" No, it's fine, just hurry. "Is it cold?" "No, it's not cold." And so they're doing this back and forth, right? And I look at my wife, and she looks at me. And I swear to God, I don't say a word. I say, and I think I'm faced with a dilemma. I'm an adult, right? A responsible member of the community. So I could have a couple of options. I could say to the kids, "Come on, guys, off the bridge. Somebody's going to get hurt. You shouldn't even be jumping." Right? It's the classic, it's always funny until someone puts out an eye response, right? Or I could just ignore it. Say, kids are being kids. Let them have their fun, and let's go. Right? What other options do I have? Catherine says jump. True story. This is exactly what happened. I look at my wife. She looks at me. I do not say a word. She goes, "Okay, just give me your wallet. Go ahead." Yeah. I hand her my wallet. Take off her shoes. Climb over the edge. Say, "Hey guys, will you jump if I jump with you?" They go, "What?" Kid down in the water goes, "Hey, mister, you jumping?" Like a guy as old as you might explode when you hit the water. Anyways, thanks a bunch. So I say, "Yeah, let's go." And they say, "Well, jump. We'll go on 3. 1, 2, 3." And I jump. They don't jump. Then they jump a second later. We land. We all swim over to the side. Everything's fine. I left out a tiny detail on this story. Tiny detail. What was my mode of travel the evening that we went to dinner and back, do you think? Say it. If I was driving in a car, would we have interacted with the kids that way? If I was surrounded by 3,000 pounds of steel and glass, no way. But if I'm walking, I pass, literally this goes to the kids on the bridge. And I look at these two little girls, and in that moment, they're my kids. Now, I'm the weird guy in our neighborhood that rides his bike everywhere, and people kind of know me, so I'm not frightening to them. They know, "Oh, I've seen him. He rides around. He's got like the 24-pack of toilet paper strapped to the back of his bike when he's coming back from the grocery store." But he's harmless. He's just a local guy. So they aren't petrified, and I see these kids, so I kind of recognize them from around town. I don't know their names or anything, but they're my kids in that moment, right? And I'm responsible. I can't now walk past. This is a good thing, because they could get hurt if they were jumping at the wrong time. God forbid I'd woken up the next morning and heard some little girl broke her leg or something bad had happened because they were jumping off the bridge. And my point is, they are all of our kids, all of the time. Not just when we walk by them on the bridge or the sidewalk, when we ride our bikes down the street and see them there. They're all our kids, all the time. And you can't turn your head away. You've got to be ready to jump with them. The only way to do that is to do our jobs the best we possibly can to build a safe and inviting world for them to free-range kids. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'm sort of vulnerable right now because I'm physically exhausted. We're in 4 straight days, 4 straight communities, but I cannot tell you how important I think this is. They are the first generation. Listen closely. Those kids, mine who are now 16 and 18 and on down, are the first generation that are going to end up with statistically shorter life expectancies than their parents because of the diseases of sedentary lifestyles. Cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, osteoporosis, all those things will kill our kids 2 years shorter lifespans than us. Because they're so inactive. Not avian flu, not Ebola, not the West Nile virus. Preventable diseases of sedentary living. And, in no small part, having built a world where they can't be as free range as us was part of the problem. You are blessed to have your hands on the lever to actually be able to do something about it. I challenge you to do it. You know what the answer is. I hope that the reason you're in public service is because you care about them. You know they are all our kids. Get up on the railing of that bridge, jump with them, have a great meeting tonight, have a great year coming up, make the right decisions. It is a privilege to talk to you guys. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work.